Hello and welcome to Precontation Points. For those of you who don't know me, but I read books so that you don't have to and discuss what went wrong. The other day I was watching YouTube with my husband and we decided to watch a video about Elon Musk. The video mentioned his now ex-girlfriend and baby mama Grimes, and I couldn't help but make a remark over why Grimes had ever been with him. Money, my husband said without missing a beat, which, duh. And that prompted me to tell him about billionaire romance novels, which had been on my mind for the past couple of days following me randomly grabbing one for free on Kindle. I wouldn't say that I've read a lot of billionaire romances or anything classified as crazy rich, but I've read enough of them to get the gist of the genre. It can basically be summed up as buying a car for a pretty woman is not the same as being emotionally connected to somebody. Taking them to Vienna for the weekend isn't the same as sharing interests and hobbies. Being rich doesn't excuse poor behavior. It made me think about doing a video about them, and I thought about how I could do it for a day before stumbling upon this idea. I'm going to read billionaire romances until I find one that I feel the characters deserve their happy ending. In short, I'm going to be asking one question of each story or series. Does the rich person deserve their happy ending? If no, then why not? And if yes, what made them deserving of it? In order to find books to read, I went to Goodreads and found a nice list. I decided that half of the first page would be good enough. Yes, there are 50 books on the page, but a lot of them are like book 5 or whatever, so when you discount sequels, that seems like a fair amount of books. Surely they can't possibly all be terrible, right? Right? Statistically speaking, at least one of these rich people must be deserving of love. Then I realized, shit, that's too many fucking books. I've bitten off more than I can chew. So I decided to tap out and simply make this video after I'd finished the Up in the Air series for Patreon. Before I even began to read, I want to touch base with books that I'd marked as having already read. The first on the list and most obvious being 50 Shades. Did Christian Grey deserve his happy ending with Anna? No. Even if you ignore the terrible BDSM scenes right off the bat, we start off the relationship with a rape scene. Anna emailed Christian to tell him that she wasn't interested in the kind of relationship that he wanted to have with her. Rather than to accept it and move on with his life, find somebody who did enjoy the kinds of things Christian was interested in, Christian showed up at her doorstep, pushed his way past her roommate, and forced himself on Anna. She said no, but everybody always seems to discount the scene as being a rape scene simply because she enjoyed herself later, I guess. That's always what the fandom seemed to act like to me. Their relationship never gets better and includes at least one other rape scene that I remember in the boathouse at his parents' house, and Christian beating the snot out of her even after she told him to stop. As the story progresses throughout the trilogy, it is revealed that Christian acts this way simply because his mother died when he was 4 years old. He expresses the anger over her untimely death by literally beating women who have brown hair like his mother did, as if the first rape scene wasn't enough, and we've got that. Later, Anna becomes pregnant and Christian literally walks out on her because he's so emotionally unprepared for anything long-term, despite the two of them being married by this point. He does eventually come back so that they can have their obligatory happy ending, but the character never actually evolved, and the only bit of character change that happened was witnessing Anna literally turn into a walking case for domestic abuse awareness. So, no, Christian Grey doesn't deserve his happy ending. I ship Anna Steele with getting a restraining order. Up next is the Gabriel's Inferno trilogy. Now, my memory is a little bit hazier about what happened during the series, so forgive me if I get a few things wrong. But do I think that Gabriel and Julia deserve their happy ending? Sort of, but leaning towards no. It's complicated. One of my biggest peeves of this genre is that the characters never have anything in common, but the central theme of Gabriel's Inferno is that years ago, Julia met a man who enchanted her and referred to her as Beatrice from Dante's Inferno. That prompted her to later chase after a doctorate in Italian literature, where she found herself under the academic tutelage of the mysterious man who had likened her to Beatrice all those years ago. So yes, the absolute bare minimum requirement of do they have shared interests or hobbies is met, and I'd even go so far as to say that academia in general is a pretty intense interest to have, since the kind of money you need to throw at a university in order to get a PhD is pretty serious. But this is where things get complicated. As mentioned, the only reason why Julia was pursuing her doctorate in Italian literature was because of Gabriel and a chance encounter a decade earlier. And while I'm not going to sit here and talk about how you shouldn't chase after your dreams, no matter how they were introduced to you, you can't say that it isn't a little weird how Julia's sort of personality trait of being an academic scholar isn't directly copy-pasted from her main love interest. What really pushed the book from the soft yes directly into no category was Gabriel's poor behavior in regards to Julia. He knew that she was violating the university's no fraternization rules, which ended up getting both of them into huge trouble with the school later. His drug abuse was also deeply disturbing, and I know that a lot of people would argue that he did eventually admit that he had a problem, and the main story was only after a few years of sobriety, which is true, and I'm not arguing about that. What I'm saying is that the first time he and Julia met, he was as high as a kite and trying to engage in inappropriate ways with then underage Julia. So in the end, not only did Julia decide to base her entire personality on a chance encounter she had when she was 15, he was also inspired by a drug addict who was openly trying to seduce a girl he knew was underage. And while their shared love of academia and Dante's Inferno seems to be a good starting point to any relationship, it's Gabriel's poor behavior towards her that pushes this to a no. The Marriage Bargain by Jennifer Probst. I barely remember reading this one, not going to lie. I seem to recall that the entire thing felt like the author had gone down a checklist of romance novel tropes with zero character development. So I'm gonna give this one a soft no, they didn't deserve their happy ending, if only because I recall not liking it. Twilight is on this list, and although I wouldn't classify it on the same level as most of the other books here, I guess Eddie Pooh is stupid rich. So do Eddie and Bella deserve their happy ending? No, but this one comes with a giant asterisk because I think that Ed and Bella deserve one another, but I don't think that they should have had their happy ending. As I'm sure most people are already aware, but Edward was creepy right from the get-go. Literally the only reason why he was even interested in Bella was because he couldn't read her mind. And do I even have to bring up with him watching her sleep? He was jealous and possessive to the point where he removed part of Bella's truck engine to prevent her from going to see Jacob. He also showered her with gaudy, expensive gifts as if it would somehow make up for the two of them having literally nothing in common. But as I said, Bella deserved him because she wasn't exactly a prize either. Arguments could be made for the sweet innocence of Julia Mitchell and Anna Steele, but I don't know how either of those two books started off as Twilight fanfic considering the source material. Bella was downright cruel to her father, even going so far as to fling his own broken relationship with Renee into Charlie's face at the end of the first book. She was cruel towards the humans who tried to be her friends, and the way she treated Jacob was downright criminal. Jacob wasn't a catch himself, but he didn't deserve to be strung along for months simply because Bella couldn't get her act together. So, yeah, I think that the two of them deserve each other, and they should have been made to suffer greatly in the final book. The next book is Fixed on You by Lauren Page, which I have literally no memory of in any way, shape, or form. I rated it 2 stars and left a review, so let's see if reading it now jogs any memories. Okay, getting a couple of memories, but nothing really solid, going 100% off from my review, left in 2015. That can't be right, can it? No wonder I don't remember it. Going off from my review and nothing else, I'm going to say that the characters in this didn't deserve their happy ending. Also worth noting that this book was so bad that I didn't read the rest of the series, so I can't say what their happy ending was, but I also don't care, so snippet from my review. Throughout the story, Alana struggles with this overwhelming urge to not get online and research Hudson, and fails. The plot revolves around Hudson literally buying the nightclub where Alana works so that he can get close to her, only to ask her to be his pretend girlfriend. Hudson is a grade A creep who knows about as much as Alana's past as Alana knows about him through her online stalking. Quite frankly, these two deserve one another. And there you have it. A zero context review from me, going only from an 8-year review. No, these people don't deserve a happy ending and should probably be kept away from society. Then there's the selection, which I would hardly count along the same lines, but the list does say kings, so I guess if you assume all kings and princes are rich. But do Maxon and America deserve their happy ending? No. But, you stammer their love form while they were doing the titular princess selection, which is true and shouldn't be ignored, but if you set aside how Maxon was playing around with however many women at the same time, their love story is exceptionally lackluster. They had nothing in common at all, and although it's been years since I read it, I don't seem to recall Max ever having had any actual reason to choose America, nor any reason for America to have chosen Max over Aspen. Yes, Max was the prince, slated to be the king, but if my choice is between guy with money that I have no emotional attachment to or actual chemistry, or a guy who loved me so much he was willing to give me up so that I could have a slim chance of being happy, hey, guess which one that I'd pick? Also, the fact that being a princess and later queen would come with so many heavy responsibilities. I know that a lot of people would do anything to become a literal princess, but the cold, harsh reality of being a princess would probably send most people running in the opposite direction. What's worse about the selection is that the main trilogy was later expanded to also include a two-part sequel about America's and Max's eldest daughter and heir having her own selection. And that was even worse, if only because literally nothing about Edelin choosing Echo in the end made a look of sense. He wasn't even in the competition, he was a translator! I get that a big part of her choosing Echo was because it was actual love, but at the same time, by the time that we got to that fifth and final book, it felt like the author had given up. So it felt like she picked a name at random from a hat and kind of went with it. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that Edelin and Echo deserve their happy ending, as Echo didn't deserve to be slurped up into the mess of Edelin's life and the author's apparent lack of giving a hoot about it. Why the hell is Memoirs of a Geisha on this list? I think the last time I thought about this book was when the movie came out. It's been so long that my 5-star review seems cringe-inducing to how we view this book today. And although it's slated at number 60 out of 100, I am going to read the first 50 that was going to read that many. I'm going to have to reread it for the sake of this video, so please put a pin into this for later. And that wraps up all the books that I've already read on this list, or at least the first 100 books. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to only read until all 50 books are marked as read. And then I didn't and gave up trying to get close to 50. First, I read Bear to You by Sylvia Day. The question is, did Gabriel Cross deserve his happy ending? And almost immediately, I could tell you that the answer to that question was no. The story started off with Gabriel asking Eva if she wanted to do a hanky-panky with him. She walked away without answering, but the next day he forced her into his office where he sexually assaulted her. This was literally the third chapter of book 1 of 5, and I was instantly throw the entire man away. I highlight that I feel sums up the relationship. My self-esteem isn't that bad, I protested. He took a sip of his champagne. Isn't it? So tell me something you think he likes about you that doesn't have to do with fun times or codependency. I thought about it and came up empty, which made me scowl. Eva kept telling Gabriel that she wasn't interested in him, and he kept pushing her and constantly disrespecting her boundaries. Even when they did eventually agree to give being in a romantic relationship a shot and not simply a friends with benefits situation, they broke up literally every other day over the stupidest reasons. And while I'm quick to scream out about how terrible that Gabriel was, Eva wasn't exactly any better. She could have and should have walked away at so many different points, but every single time Gabriel came back, she caved like a flan. But I'd like to add that Eva also came for money, so it wasn't like Gabriel was throwing Porsches at her in an attempt to buy her love. And I can cheerfully say that both of these rich characters did not deserve their happy ending, whatever it may be, because I gave up after one book. That's how bad that it was. Up next is On Dublin Street by Samantha Young. The question is, did Brandon Carmichael deserve his happy ending? This one took a bit of time to get to that no, but when it finally did show up, it was a solid and almost immediate one. The book faffed about for the longest time with Brandon circling Joss, flirting with her despite her obvious disinterest and bringing out some cliche model girlfriends every other time that Joss saw him. And I'm fine with all of that, so long as the book is actually building the character of her actual development. Instead, what we got was a man who followed a woman into the office of a bar, refused to leave when she told him to, refused to give her personal space, and sexually assaulted her. What's worse is that even when they started up a friends with benefits relationship after much pushing from Brandon, he went from being a jerk to being this absolute unit of a man who constantly lied to Joss, disrespected her boundaries, and refused to let things go. There's pushing people when you think that they need to be pushed, and then there's refusing to accept boundaries and generally making a pass out of yourself. And he continued to lie and manipulate her even after they'd broken up, especially because they'd broken up because he refused to accept that she legit didn't want him. Towards the end, I pointed out to my friend that there's a huge difference in loving somebody and actually wanting to be with them. Simply because you love somebody doesn't mean that they aren't toxic trash. And on some level, I think Joss understood that, which is part of the reason why she was so quick to keep pushing Brandon away. Well, that and her own attachment issues over her family being killed when she was 16. This was another book where the female lead also had walls. So again, it wasn't like Brandon could simply throw money and material items at Joss to win her over, simply because she could go out and get a Porsche if she wanted one. I finally remembered to go back and reread Memoirs of a Geisha. Now, I know that this book has a lot of controversy around it now because not only was it written by a white person, but also by a man, and we don't have time to get into any of that. And when I was reading through it, I thought that we weren't also going to get into the child grooming. But then the ending happened, and I was like, well, I guess we gotta talk about it. So, do I think that the chairman deserved his happy ending? Honestly, this is probably one of the more nuanced books for a couple of reasons. The first and foremost being that the chairman and Sayuri didn't hook up until the last couple of chapters. And even then, Sayuri's happy ending is her mainly glossing over the major points of her life with him rather than the day-to-day instances like in literally any other romance book. Another huge thing about this book is that, considering how much Sayuri obsessed over the chairman for about 15 years, and even how they kept running into each other throughout their relationship with Nobu, we never actually saw many meaningful interactions between Sayuri and the chairman. Now, the more I think about it, there were literally two. When he first met her and started her obsession, and then at the end when he confessed everything to her. So, is he a good person? The narration makes it difficult to fully answer this. He was nice to the random little girl that was crying on the bridge, but it's honestly going to take more than a single act of kindness to win me over. He was polite and passing to Sayuri, but again, the bar shouldn't be set at is nice to near strangers at your company party. With that alone, I could have easily said yes, but then he told Sayuri that after the encounter on the bridge, he'd asked Mameha to seek out and train up the young girls with the gray eyes, which is going back to what I'd mentioned about child grooming. Granted, the chairman did not personally train Sayuri, but at the same time, when he went to seek out Mamehe, he was basically asking for her to do the grooming for him. And he doesn't exactly win any favors when he said that he'd step aside to let Nobu have Sayuri. Because while some people say that he was simply being a good friend, the only thing I can see is him admitting that if Nobu hadn't expressed an interest in Sayuri, he would have been with her a while ago, and that maybe he would have even been on her Mizuage. And we don't have time to get into how creepy the Mizuage scenes were. So I'm going to have to say that no, the chairman probably didn't deserve love. He went out of his way to ask Mamehe to train up a girl so that he could be with her. And when he did end up being with her, she was literally his side chick. The dude literally didn't leave his wife and paid for Sayuri to have a tea shop in New York. Like, can you imagine if you were married to that jerk? Plus, the child Sayuri mentioned having with him ended up ruining the wedding of the chairman's daughter. So yeah, this book was not good and the romance was garbage. Next book, This Man by Jodi Ellen Malpass. And the question I keep asking, does Jesse deserve love? Now, this book was a complete and utter chore to get through, mainly because, like in a lot of these other books, Jesse was immediately a jerk towards Ava. He pushed himself onto her and refused to take no for an answer. In hindsight, I probably should have quit while I had my answer and stopped wasting so much of my free time slogging through this nightmare of a book. This has nothing to do with the actual billionaire business, but this book was filled with so many typos, spelling errors, and grammatical errors. In some spots, they literally filled up entire pages of them. It said at the end that this had been self-published, but spell check is literally free. There is no excuse for this. As the story progressed, Ava found herself the unwilling victim to be in a relationship with Jesse. The red flags were present from pretty much the moment he was introduced as a character. The first being that he lied to Ava about how old he was, and every time she would try to ask him, he would give her a different number. I hope I don't have to explain to people that when others openly and obviously lie about something as minor as their actual age, it makes you wonder what else that they're lying to you about. Over the course of the 400 pages of this novel, Jesse would stalk and nonstop harass Ava. Even when she agreed to date him, he would show up at her work, prevent her from actually working, and call her phone at all hours. And it was after a few days of this that Jesse would disappear to be completely and utterly unreachable for close to a week, only for him to pop back up again and continue his harassing behavior. After the two of them had been together for barely a month, he sent his friend to where Ava lived and literally took every single item in her closet and moved her in, without permission. He also took Ava to his own apartment and refused to let her leave. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that sounds an awful lot like kidnapping to me. He also refused to let her go to work. He hid her clothes so that she would be unable to leave anywhere. He also forbade her to go out for drinks with her friends on a Friday night. I don't know about you, but it kind of sounds to me like the guy is trying to make her so financially dependent upon him, as well as to force her away from all of her friends so that she has no way of escaping his clutches. So romantic, said nobody ever. About halfway through the story, Ava decided that she loved him, yet the narration never actually showed a woman in love. Jesse would tell her to do something and she'd give him the verbal middle finger. He'd show up at her work and demand all of her time and she'd tell him where to stick it. He'd ask for bedroom fun times and she'd tell him no. So in love! This is literally the most romantic thing ever! This was the first book in the series. However, at the end of the book, Ava finds out that the hotel he runs is actually an adult fun-time hotel for adults with really spicy interests. For some reason, despite the lying, finding out that the guy was a literal homewrecker, the guy literally kidnapping her, the guy hiding her clothes and forcing her to wear lingerie all the time, the guy preventing her from going to work, it's finding out the true nature of this hotel that broke her. She broke up with him, and the book ended on that note. And in my opinion, that was literally the best part of the book. There are no more books after this, and you cannot convince me otherwise. Good day. It was after I'd finished reading that, after taking me way longer than necessary because of moving, that I realized that I couldn't keep going like this, that I needed to cut down on the amount of books that I was going to commit to if I ever actually wanted to publish this video or not. So I did a full series on Patreon. Maybe somebody might argue, but Sophie, you only read the first book in the series. Mr. Moneybags totally changes in the third book. I doubt that quite a lot, but sure, let's give reading a series a shot, shall we? So I read the Up in the Air series by R.K. Lilly. The main series was a trilogy, and then there was a bonus book that I didn't read that was like a collection of stuff that happened later. I tapped out at that point. Like so many other books that I read for this video, this first book started off with the male lead James pushing himself onto the female lead Bianca, aka B. Their first interaction to us, the readers, was him shoving his tongue down their throat on a plane, of which she was working as a flight attendant. It hardly got better after that. James relentlessly pursued her, going so far as to show up at her house and demand that they date. B was kind of curious about the things that he had to offer, since she was also drawn towards the BDSM life. And yes, she did eventually agree to do bedroom stuff with him, but at literally no point did she ever say, "Hey, this is okay, I want to be with you, James." James 100% controlled their relationship, dictated where they went, when they went, and who they would be with. At one point, not even a week after their relationship started, James went out and bought Bea a new wardrobe for at least 3 different residences that he owned in 3 different states. He also got her name tattooed on his chest in really big letters, and he changed his will so that she would inherit everything from him, after having been in a relationship with B for about a week. Unhinged doesn't even begin to describe the guy. A lot of reviews warned that the first book read like the Walmart version of 50 Shades, which is impressive seeing as how 50 Shades is the Walmart version of Twilight. What's worse than Walmart, like Wish or Shine or something? I don't know. Anyway, yes, there was a lot of BDSM stuff in this book, and some insanely questionable outside of the bedroom scenes, including a scene where they literally did it while riding a horse. Probably in the top 5 most WTF spicy moments in a book. That the scenes themselves were fairly standard. Unlike the quasi-rape scenes in 50 Shades, at least the author seemed to be somewhat aware of how you're supposed to do scenes. I was more impressed with the stuff that happened after, with James taking care of Bea and making sure that she was in a good place mentally after spanking her, etc., etc. But as a lot of this stuff comes down to, James seemed way more into every aspect of their relationship than Bea did. The consent was iffy, especially in the first book. The third book was where everything went downhill, because at the end of the second book, Bea still wasn't 100% on board with being in a relationship with James. She thought that it was kind of weird how James had spent so much money on getting her a new wardrobe, about how she didn't want to move in with him, she didn't want to stop working. But in the third book, all of that went flying out the window. When the two of them weren't banging, they were gushing about how much they loved one another. She knew that she wanted to marry him too, after barely having known each other for 2 months at this point. But then again, halfway through the third book, it was like the author stopped caring about literally everything. Even the big events like Bea doing an art gallery showing was quickly glossed over. How them going to freaking Japan was glossed over. Them literally getting engaged was glossed over. And if the author doesn't care, then why should the readers? At literally no point in the trilogy did James have any sort of redemption. He had a come-to-Jesus moment when Bea's terrible father shot her, but then the book ended after she woke up in the hospital, and we had a time-skip epilogue to show them getting married. But every single thing James wanted, he instantly got. He wanted Bea. He got her. He wanted her to move in with him. She did that. He wanted her to quit her flight attendant job and be a full-time artist. She did that. He wanted to have kids, even though she didn't. She had a baby in the epilogue. James is a terrible person from start to finish. Literally, the first 2 books were half about Bea hemming and hawing on if she actually wanted to be with him or not. I feel like if the author hadn't given up somewhere between books 2 and 3, and the ending could have been a lot better than it was. But then again, anything would have been better than the author glossing over them getting engaged on Mount Fuji. Did James deserve his happy ending? No. As mentioned, he never once actually worked towards redemption. Every single thing was simply handed to him. He was terrible towards Bea, abusive and jealous. He literally forbade her to talk to anything male when he wasn't around, except for her gay best friend. In no way does James deserve his happy ending. And there we have it, folks. About 11 books or full series of rich guys being jerks. Literally none of them deserve their happy ending, and all of them should probably be drop-kicked into the sun. Anyway, up next, I'm going to read either doctor romances or military romances to determine if any of those groups of fictional characters have more redemption in them than rich guys. I haven't decided which one to do first, so it'll be a surprise when I drop the next video, I guess.